Hello, and we're back once again with Niish. So we left the first half on an interesting note of um, timing, mm, enough being enough, and learning how serenity and peace uh, mm, are the norm of the world according to the Tao Te Ching. And you were also mentioning, and you actually asked me something about. I think it was connected to what's happening in the realm. I think your question
Yes.
was coming like from that perspective, and I wanted to also ask you and bring up these ideas, a few ideas that you mentioned near close to the end of the first half that really caught my attention, and caught my curiosity. You mentioned on 2001, or in connection to 2001, you mentioned kind of like the awakening of an ancient AI. And then you mentioned having experience with ancients. So I'm very curious about that. And I have a few other ideas that can start popping up as we begin to speak. But mm, let me just preface a small thing of what I think is happening in the realm. I think that it's interesting how today we are talking about, or the culture is talking about um, virtual reality and simulation theory and stuff like that. And when that started coming up, and people started talking about it, uh, from my perspective, that immediately connected the dot to spirituality, in particular to Eastern spirituality, where for example, in Hinduism, or let's call it in Vedanta, uh, they speak, and as well as Buddhism, they speak about Maya being illusion, and Maya being the realm where our physical body is, particularly our physical body. I would have to think a little bit if the astral is also considered as part of Maya. Maybe it is, and yeah, I think so, because of reincarnation. The astral body is that which reincarnates, as far as I understand it. So when the culture of nowadays started using these other metaphors to describe these things, it immediately resonated with me as, okay, we are starting to get to the point where these ancient civilizations have been for thousands of years. We are starting to catch up, but of course we needed to use the words that are connected to our culture now, or the metaphors, because that's how we are more able to understand them, or how our culture is more able to understand these things, is by using the words of the things that are nearer to it. So
Yes.
I'm thinking that what's happening in the realm is very much connected to this, to Maya, to virtual reality or simulation theory or holographic universe, all these ideas that are coming up. I'm pretty sure that at the core of our, maybe let's call it our human experience, I think, is this idea that we are in what some might call a prison planet, some might call a teaching or a school. Different metaphors that point at different aspects of the thing, but what they have in common is that this isn't the absolute reality, but it's a subset of reality. It's an aspect of it where we have the opportunity of learning things that probably aren't possible to learn somewhere else. That's why it exists.
And so my question was to you, why is it when we look around a sense of takeover, a sense of total control with these governments really ironing down on the people. And I mean, not far from you, Venezuela, they've been experiencing this for quite a while. And now everywhere is really, a lot of the other countries in the world are um, going into severe realities of control, of total control. And so I'm trying to see what's your perspective on that.
So in general, I think many things are true at the same time. It's kind of one of the characteristics of this Maya, of this illusion, is that it kind of works or shifts a little to accommodate your point of view and my point of view and the other guy and etc., without ever contradicting itself enough to not be able to exist, let's say. So it can become very, very paradoxical and very weird, and at the same time still feel real to each one of us. So on the one hand, we could say there is this aspect of the totalitarian mentality kind of starting to gain traction in certain places. And at the same time, we can look at this, it's like the same thing can be looked at as good or bad, quote unquote, right? Depending on the perspective that we take. If we take a perspective of this is something that's coming from outside of me, so I am in part not in control of this, or I am not the cause of this is coming from the outside, then if we look at these dark times, we can see them as being imposed on us from outside and being caused by others, which I don't find that a very empowering point of view, although I do realize, or I do recognize that there is, like I was saying, some truth in that, the yin and the yang. Okay, but if we look at it from the other side, this that is happening is coming from within me. It's like a kind of soul or shadow detox that's happening. So I'm like, and we and the collective unconscious is like throwing up or puking all this dirty gunk that was stuck, that has been stuck within it for so long. Because let's be honest, it's kind of cyclical. Maybe today we could say Venezuela, but 1,000 years ago the same type of mindset was more prevalent in some other part of the world, and in some other parts maybe it wasn't, and today it's present here but not present there. So this is turning into a very long answer. I tend to like look at the dark side, but then I try not to dwell too much on it, because I don't find it helps me. This is just me, right? I don't mean that anybody else should think this way. I don't find it empowering for me to put so much of my energy into looking at the darkness, or at the darkness as being something that is victimizing me or that is oppressing me. I tend to look at it more as, okay, the course or the class has just become a little bit more difficult, and it requires more ingenuity, more creativity from me, so as not to be in the role of victim in the world, but to be, it's like, okay, how can you use this? The universe or the Tao gives us this and says, okay, how can you use even this to be sovereign, to be evolving in your consciousness, to be loving, to be kind and compassionate, like for example, what we are doing, sharing these different points of view, I think that is one very, very powerful activity or thing that we're doing, because many people feel like we do and can understand the world from a similar prism or perspective as we do, even though we don't need to share 100% of our views. And it's like you have what used to be called the mainstream becoming like drier and drier each year, and more people that used to swim in that river are now aware that there is lots of floating poops on that mainstream, and they are starting to go more towards the outside of that water. As it's shrinking, they're even getting kind of closer to the edges, and slowly they're starting to find different branchings of this mainstream, and the mainstream can only survive as long as it convinces us that it's the mainstream, or not the darkness can only survive as long as it convinces us that it's the mainstream. As long as we think this is what the majority think, it will convince us not to shine our light on it, but it's bringing up this metaphor of once you turn on a light, the darkness immediately disappears, instantly. It has no power at all against the light, but what it does have is the ability to be exactly at the borders of the light, so as far as we keep on sharing the light and sharing the love, I think there is nothing that can completely control us. There is always time, nothing is permanent, and of course this is easy perhaps for me to say from a country where it's relatively safe and relatively free, but what's happening is something that's quite global. So I think it's time for us to like walk the talk. We've always been talking about, and not always, of course, but for so long, people of our similar like-mindedness have been talking about conspiracies and the darkness, and now that it's completely on the open, I think it's time to, like we were saying in the first half, to stop saying, oh, I called it on whatever year. That's not important anymore, because it's so clear that now it's like, of course, the only thing that's left is to go within. I had this, and just to close this long rant, I recently had this like understanding that everything that happens outside is kind of like arrows, pointing towards us and pointing to our inside, and we keep getting distracted with the color of this arrow, or this arrow has LED lights, and this arrow is made of this material, and we forget that, okay, but they are all pointing the same way, and they are all pointing that they are created, they are pointing to their source, which is us, which is me in my reality, you in yours, whoever is watching in their own reality, and then there is the common consensus reality, but that gets created from the sum of many individual realities. So this is helping us, I believe, remind ourselves that as long as we look within and we don't escape from this sometimes very difficult thing, which is to look within, as long as we are looking to the inside, everything is going to be okay.
Yeah, I come from a triumphant state, point of view always, and hardships have been great lessons in my life. I've had many from the beginning, and I feel that somehow I signed up for them, and maybe not how they played out, but that I had signed up for a certain amount of rocky road in this experience so that I may test myself. And that's what I mean, truly test myself and put myself through extreme experiences to see where I am in my process and in as I'm in this realm. And now I see that on a collective level, we're moving into very uh rocky road. And there's something that's always interested me in this is the idea of false light. And when we look at a perfect emanation, when we look at something as, uh, you know, for me, there's very interesting layers of consciousness or layers, membranes of ideas between what is considered organic and what is considered artificial, what is considered real and what is considered false. And as I see the realm right now, it's apparent to me that we are in an inversion for sure. Language alone supports this, but beyond that, we're in some sort of an inversion from a distortion. So it makes it a little bit more interesting as we try to conceptualize what we're going through. And part of this conceptualization is in parsing out what this idea of false and real is. And that's where I am finding myself very much. I have a real relationship with this idea. And if you are, for example, holding a plastic flower in one hand and a natural flower in the other hand, they both have an energetic signature. The facsimile of the real flower can look as real as the real flower, but yet they're quite different. One is a facsimile of the other. And so when you kind of throw yourself into the idea of false light, a light bulb, as opposed to a candle or an oil lamp that has a source of an element, but then facsimiling or fabrication of that through the processes of tinkering with elements and material to create something that looks just like that flame, as far as illumination in a dark room, is an interesting place to go intellectually. What's the difference between the light bulb and the candle? What's the difference there? Well, I think there's a major difference there. As far as illumination in a room or illumination, period, illumination, you can achieve the same effects and to some extent, you can what we do is we gain control when we start extracting from the natural element. We gain control of the element and we use it. So if I want a 60-watt bulb, I have a 60-watt bulb. If I want 100 watts, etc., I want full spectrum. I want to grow something and I need full spectrum light, then I do that. These are all facsimiles from the natural light that was the source light, which was flame, the element of fire. And in tune with this, we're told that our main luminary in the sky, the sun, is basically this. And so in my lifetime, I remember the sun as yellow and very vividly, very, very vividly. There was a point when the sun was not yellow anymore, and it was about 2001. That's when we started to see this more white type light coming from the sun. And if you did not experience the sun before the sun that we have now, I can give no words. There's just like in all great art and all great emanations of expression about the beauty of something or the characteristics of something. We can try to get around that. We can try to express it, but if you didn't experience it initially, it's never going to be something that can get completely thrown into the language of communication from one person to another, from one person that experienced it in its raw natural state to another person that did not experience it in its raw natural state and only experiences the facsimile of it. And so I remember being in the time when the sun was yellow and warm and it didn't pierce through you and burn you. I'm in the time now of the sun appearing to be more white, and I know it still appears yellow to people, yellowish, but not like it used to. It's a whole different thing, and it's more piercing, it's more intense, it's different. It's just 100% different. Is this a facsimile? I keep trying to find myself in question of that. Is this a facsimile? And then I go and I look at the nature of fire again. I stare into the fire. I gaze into the element. I have a relationship with the element. I watch it as it expands its frequency and going to a super white hot flame or a super hot blue flame or then the more less hot yellow. And I try to understand it. Then I look at the established physics, which I'm not I don't buy into anything 100%, but I look at people who have studied these things and see what they have found. And conversely, or not conversely, but similarly, I take the same thought processes to the facsimile of light. And it's two different experiences. Which one's correct? Clearly, in the idea of time, as we were talking about earlier, the flame, the core element of fire came first in the idea of time. And then from there, we have learned to extract through our alchemical sciences to make that into an artificial light. So is that better? Is it an evolution? Is it something that's taking us into a better place? What is it? Does it have a quality of good or bad? Does it have a quality of good or bad if all of a sudden the raw element is completely removed from everyone's reality and moving forward in the future, just like how the sun changed, people in the future will have no relationship with actual fire, the element of fire, and only a relationship with the element of the facsimile of fire, of light that is not fire, but it is mimicking fire. And how far into this kind of facsimile within a facsimile within a facsimile of reality can we get before there is no memory of times before? If we get trapped into a labyrinth of conscious Velcro, if you will, because we've moved so far away from core elements that created the initial reality, the perfect reality, where the original distortion came from. What are we? What are we looking at? Does this become monstrous? At some point, it seems like there's a potential for a grotesqueness that is almost profane in my opinion, but I'm not characterizing it as bad or good. So that's where I'm at with this reality, Rafa, is what is real and what is facsimile? Where are we going within this idea as we see things outside of us with the total control? Now, if we look at what the total control is in the world around us right now, it is separating us from the natural world. It's intentionally separating us from the natural world. And how are they doing it? They're doing it in the name of the natural world, saying we are destroying the natural world and that whole green thing that's going on. We are destroying it, so we need to find all these facsimiles and zero carbon emissions and all this, and so it's pushing the natural world further away as we're being pushed deeper into a world that is detached from nature and prescribed to us, like a physician in the allopathic medical field today would give you a pill, whereas the naturopath will give you an herb. Do you see what I'm saying? This is dangerous water we're in, and I see how easy it is for one to be entrained or enticed towards the facsimile, the distortion from the natural. And then at some point, that becomes such a reality that is got so much co creation involved with it that it would not know that it's came from a natural source, another source. It becomes its own reality with its own false light God.
I think I see what you mean. It's on the one hand, it's kind of heavy, it's kind of dark. I don't know that. Well, let me say first, I do see that one of the risks might be this, and I kind of see it happening or trying to happen, this tendency of creating maybe like similar to what you were saying, like a kind of a virtual reality within a virtual reality, a facsimile within a facsimile. Our separation from the natural world, from living closer to nature to now living in cities mainly, or many of us. This has or carries along with it lots of lots of cons, lots of negatives, let's say. As for example, I watched this documentary called, I think it's simply called Earthing or Grounding, about the power of simply walking barefoot on the ground, and which is, of course, for people like us, obvious and evident, but it's very nice to see a documentary being made about it that can help raise the awareness of ourselves and others to the importance of this, and to help us reconnect with nature slowly. So I see what you're saying as kind of, if things continue on this kind of gloomy timeline, we are headed that way, right? It seems like we're headed that way, the extreme facsimile within a facsimile. But where I would say that kind of, yeah, where I would disagree is that I don't see this timeline as extending too much in time, too much forward, because the awakening that is happening is silent. People are slowly waking up, and just like when we are individually, evolving in consciousness, sometimes some understandings or some growings or some evolution, we can do it with just a simple understanding from within, but sometimes we need the outside to scream at us or to shake us in order to learn a lesson. And I think many of us who did begin our awakening and our conscious evolution some years ago, for me, for example, 9/11 was a very important moment to my awakening, to first to the sort of conspiracies in the material realm, but then eventually this took me, on a path of spirituality. And I'm thinking that the way that I'm seeing it is that the people who haven't woken up or haven't started their awakening until now necessarily need this strong wake-up call from the outside, you know. And I think that people, so that's why I think people are starting to wake up in greater and greater numbers, but we don't realize because they're perhaps waking up differently than we did, but they are on their beginning stages, let's say, of the awakening. And in those stages, they are more easily manipulated. And that's why I think people like us and the work that we're doing and the information we're putting out will be and is very powerful for people who are awakening, as well as people who are already on a journey, because they'll be able to see the vision from somebody who's already walked some more of the path, you know. And at the beginning, what's most like attractive is this: people start the awakening, you know, by confronting the victim mentality. I think that's one of the main and first aspects of it. And in that stage, you're very manipulative or manipulatable, whatever the word is, very easily
Yes.
manipulated, right? And in this stage, they need a particular kind of assistance in order to develop the discernment and the intuition. But with you and I, for example, and other people's of our circles, we've already had several years of walking this path, and we've gone through different stages. So the conspiracy stage, we've kind of finished shedding that skin. I think I see that we still have some of it because it's so in your face right now that like the final wounds and the final traumas connected to it are coming up in us. And I think it's good that they're coming up because we are being able to see them. There will come a point, I know this maybe doesn't look this way sometimes, but there will come a point when we are so beyond the victimhood or the feeling of victimhood that the world will begin to reflect that to us. So what's being reflected to us is our soul, our collective unconscious, our collective soul. It's being shown to us so loudly because it's that dark, and because it's the final, kind of like the final boss in the game, it seems for me, or one of one of the more powerful final bosses in the game is coming up. And just the fact that it comes up, for me, is a confirmation that we can beat it, because nothing that happens in life is so extreme that it ends you, except maybe for death, right? And then again, death turns out to be perhaps a whole other adventure in another part of the universe. So I dislike, and I do not feel that I want the darkness that is coming up in the world to be there. I do not like that it's coming up in the short term, but I do know that it's going to be the catalyst for transformation into that reality that we all dream about. I don't know if I know how to say how we're going to get to this reality that we desire from where we are now, but I know that where we are now is the seed that will transform into what we wish.
I do agree that this is, to me, everything's emanations. And so there's an emanation happening right now, but there will be another one behind it. It's waves in a pond.
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes that's a good idea to think about, because it plays into that old platitude of this too will pass, right? And that's great. However, it can diminish the acuteness of the moment. And I do believe pain is there to teach us. I believe everything's here to teach us. And so hardships are some of our greatest teachers. Love is another one of the great teachers, and we learn love a lot of time, deeper love, through hardship. And we find, to me, all roads lead to love. But I know that sounds a little corny sometimes to people, but that, for me, at the core, when we're looking at natural elements, somehow love is right there at the core. Love is the kernel, and that's just where I emanate off of. And so the hardships that come towards me, and the hardships that can overwhelm me and overtake me and find me in the midst of, through sorrows, through pain, physical pain, through all of it, are tempering me. But at that point, when you're suffering, when you're in suffering, it is hard to remind yourself that it is an emanation and that the wave will move forward, because this is when the idea of time we were talking about earlier can extend. Everyone knows, most people know suffering and deep suffering. And you understand that in those moments, it just seems like a night of suffering can feel like an eternity, absolutely without end. There's a slowness to the suffering. It makes it more exquisite. And I don't mean in a beautiful way, I mean in a more sharp, vivid way. And that is hard in those moments to get a grasp of, that this is a deep wave that's happening at such a core level, um, ascribed by or expressed by the type of suffering one is moving through. And it is an idea that's great to understand when you're in the midst of this sorrow, that it will pass. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes the suffering is so great that another second of it seems impassable, seems unattainable. And we can't lose sight of that. We can't lose sight of that. And platitudes don't work with that kind of suffering. It's a personal thing. And this is where, again, for me, in those moments, that I have very much found myself on that razor's edge of, oh, where, how deep can this hurt go? How extreme can this get? And ultimately, for me, it's taken me into greater places. But there have been moments, Rafa, where I have thought I couldn't make another second of suffering. I couldn't make even just another to get through to what I know will be something else and the fruit from this labor. And that's what I'm talking about with what's going on with the collective right now. We haven't even begun to move through the sorrows that are coming over us now. We're just in the very beginning. These sorrows are just starting. The web is thick, the well of sorrow is deep, and there's a horrific component to it. So I myself, Rafa, I feel strong and prepared for this. My life prepared me for this. My soul's journey prepared me for this. I came here to be here for this. This is a major awakening event, as you were talking about. This is a big, major event that is tied into the absolute center of whatever is really going on at the core of everything. And so I want to experience it, and I signed up for this. However, I don't know until we start riding into the actual horrors that are to come, how I will process that until I get there. And this is where the testing comes in, my own testing ground, that everything before now, just like we were talking about with Jung and Plato and Philo, all the great shoulders I've stood on before, that teachers that taught me how to move through realms of realities, of non-realities. This is when my synthesis of those greats, when I started to become myself and the becoming of myself, this is when I am now going to see if I can put my heart on the scale of Anubis and weigh it against a feather to move forward. This is that time, Rafa. That's what I think's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And each one of us, of course, very respectfully, I say this: each one of us has gone through those excruciating moments of suffering and almost losing hope and almost losing faith, and yet here we are, right? And I try to always keep in mind that part of the thing, like, of course, the suffering is here to be felt, it's not here to run away from it, because the running away from it is what has created this in the first place. The not facing our shadows as individuals, and then it translates into the collective. Not facing those shadows is what has brought this about. So we must remember that the suffering is there to be felt. And of course, when you're in it, you wish you weren't in it, because suffering, like you say, can go very deep. And on the one hand, I do not wish it on anybody. But then again, I understand through my own experience and my own going through it, how going through it, I think you use the word, tempers you. How could you know how powerful you are if you didn't have a challenge that you overcame, right? How could you help somebody else going through something similar if you didn't go through it before? And in this time, you, for example, you're here to, in your own way, be a leader. You're here to point the way somehow to others that are maybe just awakening, or for the new class that is graduating into awakening, or that is starting their course in awakening. You and I, we are here, and many others, something that used to call to call my attention, let's say, a few years back, is that I would look into the past and see, oh, so like, in every epoch, in every era, there's, like you say, these giants that guide the people of the time, and that work as role models, perhaps, even though nobody's perfect, of course. But different eras have these referents, or people that one can model, and one can imitate, And I was looking at our own time back then, a few years ago, and thinking, we don't really seem to have this kind of person, or this kind of leaders or heroes right now. And now, through, especially in part through this conversation we're having, which is kind of, it's a hard conversation, but it's a conversation definitely from the heart, and I appreciate it very much. I'm realizing now that even though it's hard to accept the role, we are here to be those luminaries, those leaders for the next chapter or the next episode. Because every time that there has been this welling up of the collective shadow. You know, let's think the world wars, um, different times of dictatorships all around the world. Every time that more or less passes. Okay, so some seeds of evil or of shadow are left lying down somewhere, and they kind of spring up again later, as long as people don't do that particular work with the shadow, or maybe again, maybe this can also, we could think again of Kronos eating his children, and Kronos has the I think it's the sickle is the name of the tool, and if we see those emanations or those distortions of it as being his children, these aspects of our shadow that we do not harvest, or I don't know what the correct term would be, but those aspects of ourselves that we don't cut or tear off from the root, they tend to grow again like weeds, right? And they're not coming out of a void. It's not that we are perfect as a humanity, and or as a part of humanity, and there's this other part of humanity that are trying to impose the evil on us. But it's, for me at least, it's more, we have these aspects that are able to grow back because we don't completely work on them or completely be with them when they come up in our own personal lives. Because for real, I think this the shadow work, the personal shadow work is the hardest thing that any person has to 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 confront in one's life. It's the hardest thing, or the hardest mission that a person has, is to feel their feelings, you know, because of many reasons, you know, there's conditioning, there's trauma, and basically because feeling certain feelings hurts, and it's very, very much painful, and we suffer from that. And that's why I think it's the main mission that we are here to overcome, because as you've kind of alluded to, the pendulum goes one way, then goes the other. This too shall pass, but then the good thing will also pass, and the bad thing will come again, the shadow, the light. And we are basically, my bottom line is, in this thing, is that the suffering is there to be felt, and as long as we turn away from it, it will regrow eventually in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And a couple things here with that. Uh, I have never, I like the idea of being an illuminary. We're all illuminaries. I think when I think about how we come into orbit with other people, and perhaps people that are not as far into this as we are, I always like to maintain some sort of casual aspect to it. This is why I don't do interviews, but I do conversations, etc. When So I don't like the teacher idea at all, and I like people to come and lounge with me, and let's lounge on some pillows, let's break some wine and light some incense, and converse and experience each other, or walk with me in the garden, and so it doesn't separate me, because everything outside of me is somehow informing me and is part of me, and I am seeing myself in the process. And I think that's such a beautiful way to approach others in orbit, is seeing yourself in the process without ego attachment, just in the beauty of it. And that's why I like to see beautiful young people reveling in their experience and enjoying their beauty when they're young and beautiful, and enjoying the beautiful cornucopia of life in different stages of life. And rather than look at anyone from on high, or the worst we see with a lot of people is judgment. I don't know how that, I mean, our whole society is based on a lot of very much externalized shadow stuff that we see in the form of judgment. And so you'll see older people be in judgment of younger people enjoying their youth and beauty. And maybe there's a projection of perhaps they didn't, or I don't know, it's in competition. I think this acceptance of the process and being within the process allows you to look at others wherever they are on their process, deeper in than you, not as deep in as you, and find beauty in that, and see what is possible. And so I can look at young beautiful people and just love them. I don't have no There's no jealousy or sense. I just want to see people revel in it, right? Enjoy your beauty, enjoy your time of bloom, and the fullness of that. I think it's an important thing. And I look at the idea of the great elders that don't have that kind of beauty. The beauty deepened, the beauty became a different kind of beauty. And I can look and aspire to want to be that. And this is when the luminaries aspect comes up. The people, the luminaries in my life that have brought that kind of expression that I'm just now talking about into a thought form for me, into, oh, I could be like this, or just I inspiration in others. This is where I've always found myself guided by these kinds of luminaries, and continue to, as we move deeper into this. And one of the things I wanted to address too is when we're talking about all of this, and in the darkness and the sorrows, and the emanations, or the waves that we move through, one of the things during that, the darkest of the dark moments, the one where you think you can't bear anymore, where you feel like you have just reached a place that is done, there's nowhere else to go, the suffering cannot go on further, that place, I think for me, one of the things that's carried me out of that space, and this is a space beyond like, I'm going to check out. I've been there. And something little bubbles up to the surface and makes me curious. And that curiosity of, is this as deep as this sorrow can go? Or that, what might be just beyond this moment? What might be beyond this second? Something sparks, and it's always curiosity. I'm curious to see where everything's going. And so, with the totalitarianism that's going on in the realm, I see how dark it is. I recognize how dark it's going to get because I can see what is happening because of the clairsentience, because I've activated that. Uh, so I know it's going to get ghoulish. However, I have such a deep curiosity about it. I want to see how it's going to play. I can't stop it myself. I can just shine. I can just shine. And in my shining, I can allow myself to be curious and see how is it going to express, and try my best to ride the most benevolent wave through it for myself by making affirmations that I am triumphant. I'm always triumphant, and I'm going to make it. And so instead of having to go the low route where I see myself suffering, I don't want to go that route. I've been that route. And so I'm looking for the benevolent way to manipulate. But what is keeping that at a pinpoint, keen focus? Curiosity. How is this going to play out, Rafa? I find myself having to engage in that idea, and knowing that the wave will pass, and then the fruit of that wave will come forward, and then we'll be back again. And how this beautiful experience is unfolding before us constantly, and how we are becoming through all of it. We are this experience ultimately.
I love that, Niche. How is this darkness going to transform into the light? It's like such a huge change of perspective, right? Instead of, oh, how darker is this going to get? It's more like, oh, let's try to detach a little from it and see and be observant and curious as to how this seemingly eternal darkness, or oh, the dark is about to win, and just this knowingness, this faith that it's the pendulum going back and forth. So like being there for the ride and for the experience, and see, wow, look at how this turned into light. Look at how the darkness from 9/11 turned into this connectedness between people, and this awakening with its good and its bad sides. Okay, of course, it's always going to be there, the yin and the yang. But look at how the conspiracies and the darkness from back then, what is it now, 20 years ago, look at how today we are so connected. And I don't mean we as the entire humanity, but the people who are capable of looking at things differently, how we are all connected, how we've all been able to find the information, thanks to the internet, to find the information that we needed to continue expanding and evolving in consciousness, that 20 years ago was not available, even though the internet was already here. The kind of information or the kind of soul literacy that we are developing now, or spiritual literacy, it just wasn't available back then. But if we look at how it felt back then, oh, they were making traveling very complicated, and the machines that you had to stand in, and etc., etc. How all of that darkness woke up people so much, right? And the same, we are experiencing the same type of cycle now, but with the difference that we are a kind of a grade ahead, perhaps, of other people. And we are able to today be these luminaries and be these guides and leaders, and how many people are coaching, how many people are channeling and doing tarot readings and astrology, and helping give people maps of the terrain and of the self, which just wasn't present 20 years ago. So I look at all of those things, and so I see that this is going to happen again. Whatever darkness we're seeing now is definitely changing into light. And you can always, from whatever moment in time or moment in the cycle you're standing, you can always either look at the dark or look at the light. You can always choose which one you pay more attention to, and in which one you deposit all of your energy. And the trick is that when you deposit your energy in the dark persists. And if you remove your energy and you turn on your light, the darkness simply disappears, because you start focusing and attracting to your life those things that would be there anyways, but which you would not perceive. And you start getting a feedback loop, of what you look at informs how you look at things. And if you start looking at brighter things and having this brighter perspective, it will start accumulating within your perception and creating more and more of what you want to see. Even though the darkness will be there, you will have this kind of perspective that will give precisely that perspective to the darkness. It will tell you, okay, this darkness is happening, but it's happening within this light, within this larger perception of reality, or this duality that we are in, this dance. There is the dark, but there is also this other aspect. And if we are more aware and more more in knowledge of the dark than of the light, I believe we are doing a disservice to ourselves. Of course, it's important to be aware of the dark, but it's just as important to be aware of the light, because if we don't recognize that people are waking up, and we only focus on, oh, certain places in the world are going down the drain, or the entire world, but we forget that there's different, and the thing is, this opportunity and this time, as hard as it might be for us to recognize it and accept it, and it's probably part of the work that we are being called to now, the inner work, is that we are being asked by the world to create the new earth. We are being asked to be ourselves the leaders and the creators and the inventors of this new, more compassionate, more benevolent and loving way of being in the world. And I think that's the challenge that we are facing in this new second grade or whatever we are in.
I like to think about engaging consciousness. And this is always why I'm always trying to bring that idea of get lucid, engaging consciousness. And when we think about the symbols of consciousness and unconsciousness, the symbol of consciousness is, of course, the light, and the unconscious is the dark. However, by engaging in the consciousness of anything, you penetrate into the unconscious of it and are able to bring that into consciousness. And by doing that, it's not a it could be a transmutation for sure, but what it's doing, it's really an integration. And in the process of integrating, I think that it's important to understand one's unconscious, to understand one's collective and move into the collective unconscious. It's like knowing your house so well that you don't need the lights on to move around it with a good amount of agility. I have a lot of clutter. I have a certain way I like to live, and there's a lot of stuff around, and I love it. Everything's a beautiful shrine or temple to me. And if you don't know where you're going in here, it could be interesting. You could knock a table over or something, and this is the point of understanding I can be in this house in complete darkness and move around without hitting a thing, because I know the darkness of this house, because I know the corners, because I know what is where. And not only do I know all of this, there's a certain sense of vibrational spatialness to it. There's a certain sense of zonar to it. And by knowing the darkness in my house, being able to walk within it in the dark, when the light is on, then the light's what informed me. It was being in the light that I knew where things were, because the light is consciousness. And in the light of being lucid, in the moment of being lucid, I'm able to decorate my house in the way I want. So then when I dive into the unconscious, when I dive into the darkness of my soul, of a dream state where I'm not conscious, I have already set up the architecture and decorated the spaces within the architecture to know how to navigate it. And this is definitely a uh, sacred way to move through one's darkness. And then when you know your own darkness, when you know your shadow, when you can walk as your shadow, you can move into dark places. You can move into the realm of shadows because you know you. And moving into the realm of shadows, which is the collective realm of shadows, this is a different dynamic because the other shadows have their own sentience, just like you do, just like you as a shadow do. But you are coming in to the realm with a knowing, a conscious engagement within your shadow, therefore lucid, moving through a realm of shadows where you can see that it's all just other entities, whatever you want to call them. Some of them are not integrated. Some of them are rogue from their consciousness. They're their projections of fears. And this realm can be scary to others if they do not bring in their own light. And I know this is a hard concept for some people to gauge and it's hard to describe, but it does come back to that inner work. And it is part of glorifying and seeing the glory in the dark as well as in the light. And by engaging in consciousness, we engage in self awareness. And by being self aware, we absolutely, like an electrical current, ignite those around us. And this creates this phenomena that we see, like stars in the canopy above us in the night.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a couple of phrases: being in the world but not of it, and this Jungian idea of you don't evolve by creating figures of light, but by making the shadow conscious. Is that correct? Something like that.
Yes, absolutely. It's so at the core of all of it, really. And that's what I'm saying by engaging in consciousness. But that's see, the New Agers took that and ran and they made it something else and it became a facsimile of, but the actual work of doing that is gritty. And because you're looking literally at all of your fears that you're not aware that we project outward. And then when we start talking about this in a collective, you start building more than you are creating realities without realizing it because we're not engaging in consciousness. This is why in dreams and the study of dreams and being a dreamer, the understanding of becoming conscious that you are in there, that I'm dreaming. And then when you realize that you're dreaming everywhere, that this right now, Rafa, is you and I dreaming, and we're sharing a space and we're talking about the dreaming that we're experiencing.
We are stewards of this new reality. We are what do you call the person who brings babies to the world? I don't know the name.
Midwife.
Yes, we are the midwife of what's coming, and it's greedy, like you say, because it requires shadow work, and whatever amount we do is okay. It's not that we need to beat ourselves up and okay, we need to complete absolutely all of the shadow work, but we are being invited into a great adventure that starts with a dystopic world. You know, many shows on TV have this kind of idea, you know, this kind of totalitarian thing and dystopic world, and the heroes are working towards creating the better reality, and we are in it. We've been seeing it reflected in art, and now it's finally here. And wherever you're at in your process is the right place to be, and whatever hand you can reach out to others is perfect, and whichever hand you open up to receive, you know, as help from somebody else, that is also very important in the inner work that we're all doing. You know, it's not that you can't do it alone, but try doing it alone. It's going to be really hard. However, if you accept help from outside or from another, that is going to be so empowering, and life can change into a positive so quickly when you accept that you need help and you get that help. Just the fact of you recognizing to yourself, I need help, that is what makes the transformation. Then whatever the person or the course or the whatever helps you is secondary, but first of all is the openness to help and the openness to change. So this, I want to respect your time, Niish. I know you have another appointment just after we finish speaking here. We could go on forever because this is a very inexhaustible topic, and it's very, very present and very important. I'm really happy that even though I had a few other more superficial maybe ideas, or perhaps not superficial but more tangent whatever ideas that we could explore, this came up naturally, and I thank you so much. I was wondering, any Scorpio in your natal chart?
Well, you know what's funny? No, but I am I'm a Taurus sun, which is the polar opposite, right? So there's that polarity with Scorpio that that connection to it.
And I am a Scorpio moon, so we are we are complementing each other very well.
Absolutely. This has been a great pleasure, Rafa. And of course, it's not done. This is just another another encounter in our emerging relationship between two souls that are encountering each other. I look forward to our next conversation as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate you saying it, and I really appreciate our friendship, even though it's a very strange kind of friendship from the standard, definition that we've learned as children and growing up. These new kinds of friendships that we are, and webs that we are weaving, between like minds who aren't physically close, but luckily we are astrally close, so we are able to manifest ways in which we can talk to each other, share information, share a smile, share a laughter, share our pets, and
yes.
my kitty is now completely asleep over there, and and yeah, I mean, I also thank the people watching, the people listening for the openness to hear these kinds of conversations, and I invite all of you to have faith. For me, it was a very important and strong and powerful moment in my life when I discovered my faith. I didn't used to believe in anything. I kind of had this kind of perception that there was something else, like death being just nothing or the end, or never felt completely the answer or the truth for me. So I always knew or felt there was something, but I was not a believer in any kind of God, in any kind of Tao. I didn't think there was anything, that anybody had any idea of anything. But connecting to elders and to other people who had already started walking the spiritual path a long time before me and had a lot of experience, connecting to people like that helped me develop a kind of faith that I didn't know I had, that I even envied on other people. I was like, wow, even though whatever X religion is kind of crazy, I do envy that guy has faith in something greater. I wish I could have that, and eventually through synchronicities, karma, whatever, I was able to start developing that in me. And there's also these moments when you're suffering so much that faith kind of like, you start losing it and you start losing your connection to spirit, and then you continue going deeper and deeper into the shadow, into the poop, and eventually you say, okay, what is it that rescued me last time from this? And for me, it's faith. So I I invite people to start cultivating that faith and knowing that things will get better because things must get better.
And stay curious.
Yes, that was very important also for me growing up, my curiosity, of course, yeah. So, well, just in closing, I want to say, well, yeah, I'm still learning, this role of the host and the Patreon thing, but I'm very happy for the people that are watching this, because most likely you're here because of your support, either to me or to Niish, and I'm really thankful for that, because really doing this work is extremely fulfilling and extremely expanding for me, and I think I can speak for Niish as well, and
Yes.
I am, but I'm not going to continue speaking for you, sorry. I am very thankful for the people watching. So yeah, thank you so much for being there, and bye.
A bientôt.
Thanks, Niish. Bye. Have a great episode later. Bye.
Thank you, Rafa.